So pretty much when your membranes are stripped, helps break your water, and then you go into labor. So for some people it doesn't always work, so I was like nervous. I was like, it's probably not going to work, but let's hope it does. So she does that, and she's like, okay, since I won't see you, we're going to have someone call you to schedule your induction. And she's like, but I think you're going to go into labor sooner than later. So she's like, but I'm going to have everything scheduled. We'll call you to do a stress test, because once you go over 40 weeks, you have to do stress tests, and they monitor the baby. They do an ultrasound. You just sit there for like almost 2 hours, and they monitor everything to make sure the baby's okay. Because if something goes down, then they'll induce you because you're already full term. So I was like, all right, fine. So when I left, they started getting stronger, even stronger. They started getting closer. They were probably like consistently 7 minutes apart. And so me and Johnny, like, we had dinner Sunday night early, like at 6 or 7. I know we're old, but we had dinner early because we were hungry. And it was, by the time we left, because we were like 10 minutes late to my appointment, but by the time we left the appointment, it was like probably noon, I would say. And we went all that time without eating, and I was hungry at that point. So we're like, okay, let's go get something to eat. So we went out to eat, but I was having contractions while we were eating in the restaurant, so I'd have to stop and be like, oh, let me just, and then I kept timing them because I was like, I just wanted to make sure, you know, I knew when they were closer together so I can call and go to the hospital. So we're at this restaurant. I'm trying to hide my contractions, you guys, because they were painful. And so when he'd drive, you know, the little handlebar, I would like grip something and just squeeze and just be like, oh. And so in the restaurant, I was trying to hide it because in the car, like, it hurt, and I probably had a weird face, you know, I was probably making faces, and at some point I was just like, oh, like, it hurt so bad, and I was squeezing the car, like, you guys, it was serious, like, the handles, I was squeezing hard because it just hurt. So I was like just trying to hold it and just let it happen. But I could barely eat. Like, I was hungry, but because the contractions were so painful, I was just like, I don't even want to eat. Like, I just need to go home. Like, I can't deal with this. So I was like, Johnny, I can't. I need to go home. So we go home. They get stronger. So by the time we get home, I was like, you have to watch MILA. I can't do anything right now. So I go lay in bed. We literally are home for an hour, you guys. I'm in bed and I'm in so much pain. I was laying on my side, and it was like super uncomfortable, but I could not move. I was just like, I can't. And I was literally grabbing the bed, just like squeezing. It was so painful. And I was just crying. And MILA was in the room with me, and she was like, Daddy, Mommy's crying. Mommy, why are you crying? It's okay. And I just felt so bad because she's 3, so she knows and she's aware of things. And so I called the doctor because I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, there has to be a way for me to be admitted into the hospital. Like, they started getting to 5 minutes apart at that point. So we're home for an hour. I called and I said, my contractions are 5 minutes apart. I know they told me to go in when they're 5 minutes apart. I just want to make sure, because I didn't want to have to come back home and then go back later. So they were like, yeah, you need to go in. And I told them the situation. They're like, go in, get checked out. So I told Johnny, I was like, Johnny, I have to go to the hospital. I can't sit here in this pain anymore. Like, it is so awful. So he's like, okay. So by this time, it's like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No, I'd say it was about 2, because we got to the hospital like at 3. So on the way there, my contractions were I was in so much pain, you guys. Like, I couldn't even walk into the hospital. He had to get me a wheelchair because it was just hurt so bad. Like, I would walk a little bit and then I'd have a contraction and then have to stop and just wait for it to pass. It just was awful. And we had MILA with us because my mom was out. She was out, I don't know, running errands or something. So we had to take MILA with us to the hospital. And so I called my mom. I was like, I'm in full-on labor, because she knew, like, I was in early labor. I was like, I'm going back to the hospital. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get admitted this time. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna go meet you there, because she was in SAC. She's like, I'll meet you there and I'll help you with MILA, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. So we get there. I had to be wheeled in because I was in so much pain. So they check me and they're like, oh, you're like 2.5 centimeters dilated. They're like, we'll watch you, we'll monitor for a little bit, but they're like, you're not that far. So basically just deal with it, almost. And I was like, okay. And so I had told them the situation, and they're like, well, you did dilate pretty quickly from when you were checked last night. You were 1.5, now you're 2.5. So they're like, okay, you need to walk around for 2 hours. They're like, if you can't do 2, at least do 1 hour, come back and we'll check you. And I was like, okay. So at that point, I was already having contractions like every 5 minutes. They were even getting to every 4 minutes. They're like, so they're anywhere from 5 to 4 minutes apart. So I go walking, and at first, I go walking around the hospital. So at first, I'd walk, I don't know, maybe like 10, 15 feet, and then I'd have a contraction. And then I walk that far again, have a contraction. So I kept getting asked by like doctors and nurses that didn't work in the pediatric area. They were like, are you okay? Do you need a wheelchair? Do you need to go get admitted? And I was like, no, they want me to walk, but I was having bad contractions. Like I was grabbing onto the wall. Like I would not walk anywhere like in the middle. I had to be next to the wall to like hold myself up because these contractions were so painful. So then it got to the point, it was 30 minutes went by, and it got to the point where I'd walk like 5 steps and then I got a contraction. Then I'd walk another 5 steps and get a contraction. It was awful, you guys. Like it just, the pain kept getting worse and worse and worse every time I walked. And so I was like, I have to walk for 2 hours. I can't, I need to, like the pains, I'm in so much pain. This, like, I can't go back home. I was like, I can't go back home. I have to get admitted. I need to keep walking. And at this point, like, I could not talk through my contractions. Like, my family was just like, are you okay? What do you need? Like, and I was just getting irritated. And I know that's so bad, but like, when you're in that much pain, you can't help it. Like, it's, I didn't mean to feel that way. It just, I was just like, don't talk to me. Leave me alone. Don't ask me if I'm okay. Just let me be. And then MILA, she almost ran into my stomach because she, you know, she's hyper, she's 3, and I was like, MILA, get away from me right now. Like, it was bad. I was in excruciating pain. So I go to the restroom because I was like, okay, now I have to go to the restroom. But then right before I get there, I have a contraction, so I had to wait. It was awful. So an hour had passed by, and I was like every like 3 steps now, I'd have a contraction, and I was walking slow, so it took forever. I kept having so many contractions. So my mom was like, don't walk another hour, just go back and tell him you can't do it. And I was like, okay, fine. So it took a minute to get there because I just would walk a couple steps and have a contraction, and then another couple steps and another contraction. They were so painful. So I go back, and they were like, oh, your nurse is on lunch. I'm going to be, you know, watching over you, but they weren't really because I wasn't technically their patient. I don't know. It was weird. So they were like, well, we'll monitor you. And they're like, where were you? How far were you dilated before you started walking? So I told them 2.5, and they're like, oh, you're like 3.5 right now, so that's pretty good. In an hour, you dilated a full centimeter. And they're like, but it's still not where we want you to be to admit you. And in my mind, I was just like, I was about to start crying because I was like, no, I cannot go back home. Like, the pain is excruciating. Like, I can't do this. Like, I need pain medicine. I need to be admitted. I need something. Like, I can't do this. Like, it was so bad. And so they were like, we're going to keep monitoring you. Your nurse will come back and we'll check you. And I was like, okay. So you guys, I was a little bit embarrassed because so Johnny and my mom and my sister and MILA were in the waiting room. So I was in triage by myself. The contractions were getting closer. They were 3 minutes apart. Even though I was only dilated 3.5 centimeters. The pain was so excruciating, and I could feel the contraction like coming. It was like mild, and then it just went bam, like full force every time. So I was like, oh no, like I had to prepare myself. I was like, I feel this contraction coming and I can't, like, I was crying. I was like yelling, not yelling, but I was just like, I was loud and I felt so bad, but I was like, I'm in so much pain right now, like I can't even function, like, and I'm kind of I was like laying back and I was like so uncomfortable, and it got to the point where the nurse was like, okay, she came in there and she's like, it's okay, just breathe. And I was like, I can't breathe. Like, I felt like I had to hold my breath because breathing did not work. Nothing worked. I was just in pain and I was crying and it was a hot mess. And so they were like, okay, we're gonna wait. Your nurse is almost here. We're gonna check you and see if you need to be admitted. So I was like, okay. And so then my nurse, because that nurse that I was watching me, she was kind of rude because she was like, oh, it's just a contraction, whatever. And I was like, but these hurt really bad. But the nurse I had, she was like, okay, you know, you did dilate a full centimeter. That's pretty fast in an hour. Like, that's a lot. And so she was like, we are going to admit you. And I was like, thank you. Oh my God, like, thank you. And so they're like, we just have to do a few tests and then we'll get you set up in a room. And I was like, oh my God, like, I was just so relieved. And so my actual nurse, when I was going to get admitted, she came in and she was like, just trying to get information, like, about what's been going on, because they need to know, like, everything. So she was like, okay, so you're in a lot of pain. And I was like, I'm in so much pain, like, I can't take it anymore. I can't do it. And she was like, okay. She was like, well, when we get you admitted, we'll see about getting you the epidural right away, blah, blah, blah. She was super nice. And I was like, yes, thank you, Lord. Like, I need something. So they get me all hooked up. I couldn't even walk. They had to wheel me. They had to take the bed in triage and take me to my room because I was like, I can't walk. It'll take me like an hour to walk down the hall to my room because of all these contractions. So, sorry, this video is getting really long, but I'm going to try to shorten it as much as I can. We get to my room. I freaked out Mila because I was in so much pain and she knew I was in pain and she started crying. So then my mom took her. My sister ended up watching her overnight because my mom wanted to be there for the birth and for, you know, all that. So she takes Mila back home, she comes to my house, gets her stuff. My sister watches her. She comes back, and so they got me the epidural pretty fast. I was probably in my room for an hour or less, and they were like, I'm so sorry, it's really busy. Everybody's having their babies like yesterday, today. So it might take some time, but they got there pretty fast. They gave me the epidural. And I was having like labor shakes, and they were like, you're in full-on labor. So then the doctor checked me. She was like, you dilated another centimeter, so you're like 4.5 centimeters dilated. Do you want me to break your water? And I was like, will that help? And she's like, yeah, it should. She's like, we're ready to have you, you know, we want you to have this baby today. Like, they were on board for me to have Emma like ASAP. And I was like, as long as it doesn't hurt, break my water, whatever you need to do. So she broke my water. They were like, yeah, you're good to go. You're gonna have this baby. And so the nurses were like, wow, you're really progressing fast. And so at first they were like, you'll probably have this baby tomorrow. And then Johnny was like, well, when do you think she'll have the baby? Because they were just like in shock how fast I was progressing. They're like, you're gonna have this baby tonight. Because I got admitted, oh God, I got admitted by like 5 p.m. in my room. So they had to do, you know, they have to do all these tests. They gave me the epidural. I felt better. It took a minute for it to kick in, but then I felt better. I was like, I could calm down, I could breathe, because when you're in labor and you have to deal with that pain, like, you're just like jittery and just uncomfortable. It's awful. So I felt better. So they were like, you'll probably have this baby by midnight or earlier. But once my water broke, it was kind of weird. My contractions started slowing down. So they were like, you're going to have to lay on different sides. So they're like, if you lay on one side for like an hour and then the other side, it'll help you with labor and, you know, go by quicker. So laying on my left side for an hour, I dilated another centimeter. And then laying on the right side for an hour, I dilated another centimeter. So it was going by fast. So I tried to get some sleep. I probably slept like an hour or two, and then I gave you guys an update. When I was in the hospital, Johnny was sleeping. My mom went to go take a nap, and she was like, just call me if you go into labor. So the nurses check on you all throughout the night. Like, you know, they got to make sure everything's good. So they were like, okay, you're dilated. And I told her, they were like, how are you feeling? And I was like, I feel pressure. And she was like, okay. And you shouldn't really feel much pain with the epidural, but it doesn't help with pressure. So if you start feeling more and more pressure, that means your baby's going down lower and lower, and you're closer to giving birth. So then she wasn't going to check me. Said she was going to check me in an hour, and then she was like, well, let me check you right now. So she was like, you're probably going to have this baby in like the next hour or two. And I was like, okay. So I called my mom. They were like, because I think at that point I was like 7 or 8 centimeters dilated. So they're like, we're going to give you an hour, and then you'll probably have to start pushing. And so they told me that it was like 2:30 in the morning. So Johnny happened to wake up. I told him, I called my mom. I was like, they're going to come back in an hour, and I'm probably going to have to start pushing in an hour. So she was like, okay, I'll be right there. So she comes back. They check me again, and I just was like, I just feel all this pressure. And then finally I was at that point. My contractions were getting closer and closer. I just couldn't feel them. And they were like, okay. It was like 3:30. They're like, you're about to start pushing in a minute. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So at 4 a.m. I started pushing, and you guys, I was so determined to get Emma out. Like, once she started coming out more and more, because obviously you have to push on a contraction, and then in between you rest, I was just like pushing as hard as I could. Like, I was making noises, like, like just screaming and grunting noises, because I was like, she needs to come out. Like, I can't do this anymore. Get out. Like, it was bad. So I pushed for an hour, and she came out at 5:03. She was out. But you guys, it was a lot easier with Emma, but it was just a different experience. It was crazy. So I had her Monday morning at 5:03 a.m. on the 20th, and it was, yeah, I pushed her out naturally. It was a lot of pressure, especially towards the end. Right before she came out, I like pushed as hard as I could, because I was like, the pressure was too much. I was like, get out now. So thank God it only took an hour of me pushing. It wasn't that bad. And yeah, so that was pretty much her birth story. The good news is this time, I didn't have an assisted birth. With MILA, I had a vacuum delivery, so towards the end I couldn't push. They had to vacuum her out to get her out. With Emma, I pushed her out all by myself the whole time, and it only took an hour. And I barely had a tear, you guys, with MILA, because I used the vacuum. I had like a 3rd-degree tear, which is like the worst tear. It was bad. I was in pain and recovery for weeks after giving birth. With Emma, like later that day, I started feeling better. And they were like, you barely teared, like you're totally fine. And I was like, or you barely tore. And I was like, thank God. Obviously you still bleed, you go through all that nasty mess, but later that night I was able to walk. I was able to get up. I was able to get up right away, actually. I mean, I laid in bed for an hour doing skin to skin with her, stuff like that, but my legs never got completely paralyzed from the epidural, which thank God. But yeah, so recovery, my whole body was sore after we got home. We went home. They wanted us to stay an extra day because I had her that morning, and they were like, okay, Tuesday you're gonna stay, you can go home Wednesday. And then, because I ended up having a low-grade fever, so did she. So they wanted to do tests and monitor. She had a little bit of jaundice, so they were like, okay, we just want to make sure you both are healthy before you go home and it doesn't get worse when you're at home. And then they did all these tests on both of us. They were checking my vitals all the time throughout the day. So 3:30 Tuesday morning, the doctor that delivered came and talked to me, which I'm like, really, I'm trying to sleep. But she was like, you need to stay another day. You can go home tomorrow, not today. And trying to explain to me when I was like half asleep. And I was like, all right, fine. Later, like at 10 a.m., the pediatrician came in to check Emma again, and they were like, she's doing so much better, like you're both doing so much better, do you want to go home today? And I was like, yeah, I do. So they're like, okay, I'll talk to your nurse, I'll talk to the doctor and see about letting you go home. So it was probably like 1:30, 2 p.m. we were on our way home. So we were in and out of that hospital quick, thank goodness. But I literally felt so sore. I felt like I got run over by a truck, and they just left me there. And I don't know why I'm being that dramatic, but my body was so sore. But down there I was okay. Like literally, maybe I felt bad for a day and then my whole body just was sore. But after like being home for 3 days, I was good. I was like, okay, I can go out and do stuff, like all this. And now it hasn't even, she'll be 2 weeks old, and I feel totally fine. Like I pretty much stopped bleeding down there. So much better. The recovery was super quick this time. I feel better. I'm just really tired because now I have 2 girls to take care of. But yeah, that's pretty much our labor and delivery story with Emma. This time around was quicker labor, easier, less painful, less recovery time than with Mila, for sure. So if you're pregnant for the second time or third time, or you've been pregnant before or whatever, trust me, it'll be easier, it'll be better. Your first time, your body's never been through that trauma, so it usually is kind of bad the first time, but after the first time, so much easier. And even though I was in so much excruciating pain, I'd rather deal with that than what I went through with Mila again, because that was traumatic. So definitely this time was so much better. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you guys are notified when I upload a new video. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is almost 1:30 in the morning, August 20th, Tuesday, I think. Don't mind me, I look super tore up. I've been obviously in labor for some time. I'm so tired. I don't know if you guys can see my dark circles. I haven't slept much. Where's the baby? Looking down the ground, dust shadows make no sound. A game of hide